What is going on, everybody? It is SCPCRNP, aka Lack of Lepers, and I want to thank you for coming in tonight. It is Tuesday, the 12th of July, and we are back at it. It feels like I've been away for a while. That's not really true. The last time we saw each other, I think, was Friday evening when we did our review of the SCPs for this week, and of course, that was only 5 articles long, so we got out of there pretty quickly, and I guess so. More time has technically passed since it's the usual time that I come back. So it's nice to see you. Thanks for joining. Appreciate you being here, my one and only. I love it. It's so reliable. It's crazy. So we are back to the reaction series, and of course we are about halfway through. If you'll recall, a nice little conversation with djkaktus. So, we will pick up right where we left off and get right into it.
Spookier than what people just kind of imagine on their own, you know what I mean? And that's, I think, the benefit of an article like that one, where...
How y'all doing tonight?
It's all left to the imagination, right? There's a very basic framework that kind of leads people in.
Trying to find a way to turn this up.
You know, ideas and,
yeah.
and imagery.
All right, what I'm gonna do here, so if you're... Let's see, how do I stop this? If you're listening to this, I'm going to go ahead. I've tried to raise this video up to audio level standards, but it's not working. So we're going to have to slow down, you know, descend the rope and the ladder to the level of this video. So I'm going to turn the mic down to kind of match this video. And then you'll have to turn up the volume on your end. And then, of course, that also makes this video a hazard for your ears. Be sure to turn your volume back down before you listen to the next thing. Otherwise, you're going to get a bitter surprise.
What I could do if I was trying to, you know, make something spooky on my own.
Check. Check.
You know, who's to say? In short, probably not. But, I don't know.
Can't remember what he's talking
Maybe
about.
that will get like a ton of attention someday, and people will ask a bunch of questions about it, and Netflix will finally get back to me, and then we can learn more about what's going on in there. Let's see here. Cassandra Banner. Hey, Cassandra, how are you doing? I hope you're doing well.
That's the biggest problem with SCP right now and forever. Actually, can I make this bigger? No offense, I don't like looking at. I don't like looking at the stream while I'm streaming. It's a little odd, little masturbatory. How's that for y'all? Not bad. Okay. Yeah, the problem with the SCP Wiki, you know, I mean, it's its greatest strength and it's its greatest weakness, which is the CC license, which no one meant to have happen. Anybody who knows their history with the SCP Wiki understands that this is a very rich history that goes back to the various early days of the site, where the initial individuals who were involved really didn't understand the implications of declaring everything on the site Creative Commons from day one. Really a day zero mistake in so many ways. They tried to form an LLC. That didn't work. They tried to incorporate into, you know, SCP Wiki Corp, you know, incorporated. That didn't work. They thought about, you know, retaining all intellectual property rights of everything posted on the site. That didn't work. So, you know, the SCP Wiki, everybody was on board with that. I mean, Dr. Gears was on board with that. Troy L. was on board with that. The Deadly Moose was on board with that. Alania was on board with that. Everybody was hopeful that the SCP Wiki would be this commercially applicable thing, but because of the CC license and because it cannot be revoked in any way, this has made it to where no one, certainly not Netflix, will be getting in touch with anyone from the SCP Wiki anytime soon. And you know, obviously that's contributed to its success, right? So, like I said, good and bad.
Thanks for stopping by. I'm sorry. I know that this message has been here for a while, so sorry it took me so long to get back to it. I've just been talking so much.
Yeah.
Will the Scarlet King factor into Project Paragon? If not, are you planning on writing a Scarlet King article at some point? Short answer, yes. Scarlet King will factor into Demon Ochier. So I'm not going to really explain too much.
Wasn't it Tufto? Was it Tufto? Because I know Tufto has their 001 as the Scarlet King. I just don't know enough about the history of that to know if that was Tufto who did that. You know what I'm saying? I think with djkaktus's works, no offense, you know, especially the big ones, you could basically just, you know, put like some kind of like bingo card out for like the GOIs and past, you know, successful SCPs and characters that most of the people, you know, want to see, and basically get bingo with almost every article he writes. I mean, there's just a lot of references to other stuff, which is cool, but you know, I don't know. It just feels a little derivative at times.
How, but it is coming, and it's coming very, very soon. Ash asks, if the children of the night in 6666 couldn't be harmed by man's weapons and magic, could they be harmed by nature, i.e. floods, lightning strikes, wild animals, poison and plant, poison?
Wait a minute. So why can't the children of the night be affected by magic? Is that something that was in the original 1000? I don't think it was. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I just read it. I just did a review on it. Very extensive review. I hope I didn't miss that. That would make me look really bad. Sounds like something that was added to the Children of the Night at some point, maybe by djkaktus in this article. I don't know. But that's how you make really, you know, uninteresting characters, is you keep adding stuff to them, and you know, before you know it, they get to be this monstrosity, this chimera conglomeration of cool things that you want them to do, so that your plot can advance.
Plants, etc. Yes, absolutely. In fact, one of the things that you mentioned right off the bat there, floods, that is part of 6666, you know, is where they talk about how
wait a minute. Oh, okay. So 6666 was itself by this point, and then Demon Ogier, I guess, is yet to be released, I guess. Oh, how exciting. I can be on the hype train.
Like there was a Children of the Night, a child of the night who got stuck in a hole when the floodwater started to rise and drowned because they cannot swim. And so
they can't swim either? Was that in was that in SCP-1000? It's just, I mean, I guess it's all like no canon, right? I mean, you can basically make them do whatever you want to do, and then it doesn't extend past the article, I guess. I don't know.
The short answer is yes, and I should say this too. They are the reason that they were impervious to man's weapons, but not the weapons of the Earth, I guess, is because you know, Titania was.
By the way, so once again, I read all of djkaktus's articles up to a certain point in about 2019, I guess, something like that. I mean, I haven't really kept track of them after that. But there was one of that Titania one was a relatively early article of his about that prison, you know, in the forest, I guess. And so if you had told me that he was gonna, you know, build like a land of lore, you know, basically go all like Middle Earth, you know, on that article of all the ones that he wrote, like that's the one that was going to be the springboard, I would have been like, damn. So,
you know, the goddess who created them, and she was effectively superseded.
Them being SCP-1000? Is that what he said? Again, there's a lot that's being pasted on here. Maybe I misunderstood.
By, she was at the same kind of level, if you think about levels of gods, she was at the same kind of level as the two gods who created humans, which, if you've read the one thing I have on the Wanderer's Library, they were Yaldabaoth and McCain. The broken god and the Sarkic.
Is that how you say it? McCain, like the English surname? Really? McCain, huh? I don't know about that one. I've been saying it McCane, which I'm sure is incorrect, but I think it's just automatologically, I think it's more interesting than McCain, which is so pedestrian. It's so routine, you know? Come on, make it exotic. Spice it up just a bit. You got to give it that good pronunciation, you know? You got to let the syllables dance with one another.
They were the two who created humans. So Titania was kind of at their level, but a level above them would be like Gaia, who is, you know, the goddess of the earth.
Goddess is actually a good word. I think it was a mistake, but Goddess I think is pretty cool.
The protector of the earth, and so they were, you know, they can still be killed by things.
Godeth. It's a good name. Something should be named that. It's pretty cool.
Things that, you know, are of Gaia's ilk, but
what's going on?
But not the same cannot be said for things that came from McCain and Yaldabaoth. For that reason, they were kind of at the same level, I guess.
What up?
Let's see here. Ash asks, "Is the laminellant?"
Shouldn't be on my phone. I don't want to stream. I'm sorry. Just killing time. Hope you're doing good. This is so relaxed.
Is SCP-4812K capable of having children or heirs? Is it
man? I don't know about these questions either, man. My keyboard
a king
just
of
died.
Anything, or is it just a fancy title? Asking on behalf of a certain prince. Laminellant is
Keyboard just died.
not. I would say probably not capable of having children. All of
Oh, my bad.
the profanities are magical. How do you even say this? Like, they're like magical apocalypses, right? And the idea being that each one of them on its own, I need to check my fantasy score at some point. Each one of them,
Hey, you do you, my man.
on its own, is, you know, capable of causing, you know, a pretty significant amount of destruction to the world of men.
Sorry, I'm a little distracted because Harmony is talking in the Discord server. You know, Society of Containment Fiction. That's where it's at, guys. About another author, and yeah. So you know, a few streams ago, I was talking about Harmony. Actually, djkaktus was the one who brought this up, and so I talked about it. And at the time, I was only looking at like the podcasts that I listened to, and like I said then, you know, almost every single cast that I happen to listen to, not everyone, but most of them, end up mentioning Harmony in some way. And so I at the time wanted to make that clear that that is a metric of importance in many ways. Of course, obviously, it's quite negative on usually on that end. And then I got some interesting data from someone. I got some interesting data about the number of times that Harmony is mentioned in the staff chat Discord. How many? If you searched Harmony's name in the staff chat Discord, how many times would it show up? How many hits would you get? Just guess. Take a guess. I'll give you a minute while I confirm the number here. Just from what the data I was sent. Obviously, I can't confirm this independently, but just food for thought. Just food for thought. You think about that for a second.
You know, Lemonellant is probably second of the three of them in terms of like how dangerous they are. The first, of course, being Yash, and the third being Vinny Vinix.
Mm-hmm.
So no, probably not having children, which is probably good. But
Oh,
Laminellant,
yeah.
you know, King of Faces, probably is just a title,
We're getting there.
I think in this case, just a title. Cactus, you writing an article that involves the king is making my brain activate. Because Scarlet King.
I don't mind taking a pause from this part of the stream because it sounds like the fanboys and girls are out in full, just asking questions about the minutiae of his drafts, which are articles, which are probably the least interesting thing I could talk about. I could listen to, I guess.
Yeah, Scarlet King is like you know, it's one of those. The Scarlet King, especially, is one of those aspects of the wiki that is really interesting because
Okay, did y'all come up with a number that you could guess? How many times Harmony's name comes up in staff chat Discord? Take the number you came up with and double it. Okay, you ready? 1,450. That's 1,450 times. I don't know if I can believe that. Can you? Only the people in the staff chat Discord know. Wow. Anyway, I just thought it was funny just to get some corroboration from that, because obviously just I'm on the outside looking in. It's just funny what you can read into sometimes and not even know how accurate you are, I guess. Wow.
I've been here a long time now. I've been here like almost 8 years at this point. In a couple months, it'll be 8 years. And I'm gonna move this closer. It's just been one of those constants, right? Where it's been like around the entire time I've been here. But I've also never, like myself, really gotten too deep into the Scarlet King lore or like been involved in it, because at least when I started, the feeling that you got early on was that like it's all set in stone. There's not much you need to elaborate on it. And
that's honestly, I'm glad you said that, because I feel like that's really why I don't find much lore interesting, is because what's the most interesting part of the lore is the initial, cooking of it, right? And then so people kind of take it and they go places with it. It's very hard for someone to take something pre-existing on the wiki that is so good, that's good enough to sort of enter into its own accepted lore, that people really like, and then take it and do something better than it originally did, right? This is the whole sequel problem, right? The sequel's burden, right, and bane is trying to do that, and it's very difficult to do that. And so I don't think that most people do that, right? So what that means for me is that particularly with world building, right, kind of like what we already saw from Cactus in this cast, where it's like the SCP-1000 Children of the Night can't be hurt by human magic and all this stuff, can't swim, all this stuff. Like it just sort of like drags the whole thing out. I think it sort of cheapens it a little bit. I think the best ways to do that are just by referencing it, almost like just not really adding anything to it or taking something away, but just sort of like casting it skillfully somehow, to use its base ideas basically as a tool, and not as a action figure, that you can kind of puppet and sort of like play with, So I think for that reason, I typically am not interested in lore. That's changing a little bit, just because I'm listening to things like Simply Creative People, and I get a little more insight into it. So of course there's a few more insertion points, but still on the whole, I would much rather read like an original article or an article that doesn't try to dabble or move or recontextualize some pre-existing lore. It's just almost automatically uninteresting for me. I guess it's maybe a fault.
One of the things that's been really cool about Project Paragon, as shown in Dread Titania, is that you can... There is still room to reimagine things, right? There's still room to reinvent some ideas, even if just within the confines of a certain canon. Like I was trying to do.
Actually, I think now that I'm thinking about it, one good example of that, like it's rare that people make it better, but one good example of that is actually Cactus's 001 with Twisted Gears, the Broken God. I think if I understand the history of it correctly, that figure that we saw in that 001 was only sort of maybe like hinted at or slightly gestured to, and it's a bold enough decision. It's a risky enough move to write an article that manifests it for you because of the things that Cactus is already saying. Those things being that sometimes it's better left unsaid, with these things sort of suggested. And then there's also another layer of risk, high risk play to make it a 001. But Hey, to the credit of Cactus and, of course, to Twisted Gears, who I'm sure does not get as much credit as probably is due, that was an excellent exponent to the Church of the Broken God.
With SCP-1000. And I'll be doing more or less the same thing with this one. It's no secret. I've tweeted a lot about it, but you'll probably not see the name the Scarlet King very much in Demon Ogier, but you will see the name, what was originally Rex Sanguine, which is the King of Blood, and then we have a
oh my gosh, dude. The King of Blood's last name is Sanguine? Really? Okay. So we are 46 minutes in. I kind of just want to see how long this question is going to last. Oh, this is going to be good. Yeah, so we're almost done. The next question is, how'd you come up with you do not recognize intrigue tag? So yeah, this is actually a great question. Oh, the next one's about Jasper Hill. I think Jasper Hill is a really, really interesting Cactus article. It's one of his more underappreciated ones. We could talk about it. I have very specific thoughts on Jasper Hill, but I think it's really one of his underrated ones. It's very good on the whole. It does have a fatal flaw, but it's very good. But yeah, so this is a great question because you do not recognize the bodies in the water is probably the most memetically sophisticated phrase that anyone on the wiki has ever come up with.
Translation of that in the new Autopapadopolosian language that we're going to be using for that one.
Oh, God.
So you'll see that guy.
Count me out.
For sure. And that character has a pretty significant part to play in this whole thing. How did you come up with "you do not recognize the bodies in the water"? The sentence, because it is intriguing on its own.
I think, okay, nothing against the article, but I think that the memetic germ, you do not recognize the bodies in the water, it's the peak of that article. It's the pinnacle of that article. So, take that for what it is for you. I'm not trying to make that a slight, but I can see how people might think that, but it's just such a good phrase. You do not recognize the body, you do not recognize the bodies in the water. Could you do that in 9 words? Could you come up with something that memetically rich, that just pregnant with eeriness and intrigue in 9 words? I don't think I can.
Honestly, I legitimately could not tell you where that article came from, partly because it's been such a long time ago. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to look. Sometimes I can jog the old noggin, as it were, by pulling the original article up.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, man. I hate to do this. Actually, I won't be able to do this, I think. You'll just have to take my word for it. So at some point this week, not tonight, but probably tomorrow, I'll be posting something on my blog that is entitled SCP Wiki Member Comes Out of the Closet, Shocks Community. And I don't want to give it away, right, why it's titled that. It's a piece of fiction. It's kind of a piece of satire, but in there there's a conversation that happens, and in that conversation there's a very philosophically charged discussion about what Cactus is doing right now. And I can paraphrase it for you. I can excerpt it for you, and it kind of goes something like this. I won't tell you the context. You'll have to read it to get why this is being talked about, but the context is something like this. Objects contain displaced human energy. And our fascination with objects in this regard corresponds to a vague, cathartic sort of commitment to objects as sponges that absorb our present selves and their histories. Okay, so this is something that we see in art. It's really one of the more remarkable things about art, and is one of the more elusive things about art, because art, as we understand it, is ultimately an objective product that anybody really that has access to it can see, right? Can consume, we'll say. But of course, those subjective parts about how the art came about, that is to say, what the author was doing, was thinking, we don't have access to, right? It shows up in ways in the piece if it's sufficiently dense and concentrated. But, everything, especially for an artist, right? So not someone who's writing something tailored to an audience, an artist, someone who's pouring their soul into their work. That work is going to contain a lot of that displaced energy. So everything that was happening in that person's present moment, and also in some ways in their past, all that's going to be funneled and concentrated and capsuled into the art form. This happens with music. We all kind of know what that's like. You can listen to music from your childhood or your adolescence, and you're immediately taken back to the scenes and the feelings and the vibes of that time. It's also pretty prominent with the scent of smell. That's a kind of a big one, where you smell something and it's very, very proximal to your memory, to your long-term memory. And so anyway, that's kind of what the article that I'm going to post onto the blog talks about in some ways. And it talks about how that is a more noble pursuit for writing, sort of letting writing be an end unto itself, as opposed to whoring that process out for upvotes. Because the problem with that is that the more and more focused and obsessed you are with upvotes, the more that bleeds into your capsule, right? It's writing is too powerful of a thing to keep, to not operate. So if you're writing for upvotes, it's still going to do its amazing, miraculous job of sponging, all of your life existentially and phenomenologically into your art product, into your writing or whatever, music or whatever it is that you're making. But the sad truth is that more of that stuff that is sponged at that time and in that art form will increasingly be your compulsive obsession with upvotes if you're in this style of writing, right? And so what he's doing can be done for people who have been in these periods of high upvote obsession, and they kind of go back to those articles and they kind of get that vibe back again. Hopefully they're in a different place. But I wanted to mention that because it's just very interesting and almost coincidental, but so fitting at the same time, unsurprisingly so. To see Cactus do this to jog the old memory, it's really, really a deep thing. Really, really amazing to think about.
I'm looking at the first comment, like if I put an author comment on it. Let's see here. Oh, this is useless. They made many thanks to Decibel and EC, both of whom helped hash this out in chat. This is written in 2016. That was well over 5 years ago. I can barely remember things that happened a week ago. There's no chance. I would say probably if this is like,
I mean, gosh, dude, like, okay, what's weird about that is that, I don't know if you know this, but I write music, and I really write it for myself and my close friends. Like, I'll just share it with my close friends. And I can go back like years, and I kind of remember what I was doing and where I got the ideas from. I don't know. Does that mean that Cactus wasn't really putting his heart and soul into his work? I don't think so. But damn, man, it's a shame you don't remember that.
Like anything else that I've ever written, chances are pretty good that, like it was just, I don't know. Like, I like taglines a lot. Like I like lines that kind of hit you in the right way.
Oh, for
right?
sure.
And
he's very good at that, by the way. Really, really good at that. You can almost think of it like as an aphorism, like aphoristic writing. Cactus is good at that. He has a very, very good sense for what is mimetically successful. Okay, so say what you want about him, but that's That's really his style. That's really what he would say. He'll say that he's writing in that fashion. And it's a very successful way to write. So, can't bash it too much.
So when, I have tried to do that in certain articles too.
Just totally dead.
That one probably, especially back when I wrote that one, I was driving. There was a long period of time where, to get to work from where I lived, there was two ways I could take. I could either take the shorter route, which is on the highway, that went down. It was like a 40-minute drive down to where I worked. Or I could take the longer road, which was more like a 50-minute drive, but it was a long bridge, a long road across a lake.
Fucking love long drives, man. It's like walking, showers, long drives. Those are where the best thoughts live.
There where I lived in Indiana, and I thought I was thinking a lot about lakes at the time, and so it probably stemmed from that. Sometimes I would just get. I mean, I have written articles in the past, and I can tell you right now for sure, 100%, I wrote 2316 because I had the idea for that line, and then wanted to write an article about it because I thought it was cool.
I wish I knew what 2316 was, but I can't type it into my phone. I'm on my keyboard because my keyboard just died. So let's do it on my phone. Actually, put this thing to good use for a change. What do you say? How much? I tried to rewind with my keyboard. Fuck me.
Sometimes I would just get. I mean, I have written articles in the past, and I can tell you right now for sure, 100%, I wrote 2316 because I had the idea for that line, and then wanted to write an article about it because I thought it was cool.
That is the one we're talking about. Great. Thanks. That was great.
Same kind of thing I've done before for other articles.
Well, see, that's funny because, like I said, that is really the peak and pinnacle of the article. Didn't I just say that? And turns out from this commentary, it's actually the germinal, it's the origin point of the article too. So I guess that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I mean, that's a great way to write. Cactus sort of, and I think most people on the wiki, they sort of write with a given, a highly concentrated, thing, whether it's this kind of thing where it's a germinal mimetic phrase, or it's like an emotion, like that's big with Cactus, and a lot of other people write that way, where it's they're not really trying to communicate anything here, they're trying to communicate something here, which is good. Don't mistake what I'm saying. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. In fact, this is more important than this, okay? By far, it's not even close. I think that's why it's very successful, is because, it's the same with musicality and musicianship and music in general, I guess, is that, basically we're trying to connect emotionally. There's a very small sliver of people who listen to music and like music who are in it for, highly, intellectual satisfaction, right? Those sorts of people end up kind of in the periphery, in the very unoccupied spaces of the music world. Let's say something like, classical composition, but even more so than that, modern composition, with like 12-tone, atonality, serialism, stuff like that, that's really this kind of stuff. It's not really for that, in a lot of ways. And there are equivalents to that in containment fiction, someone like Placeholder McDoctorate, I think, is more interested in this, than in that. And you gotta applaud the guy. We did a few streams listening to an interview that he did. You gotta applaud the guy because it's very difficult to make this kind of stuff popular. It's very difficult to make this kind of stuff, sort of commercial, right? And so that's really an achievement with what he's done with things like admonition to an extent, and I guess other things too, like SCP integer or his 001. Now, I will say that things like admonition certainly get whatever is lacking in connectivity from it being a sort of this thing is given to an article like SCP-6747 because of its visuals, right? So it's almost like two things that make the whole, is if you're going to be really, cerebral with your writing, you need to leave something there for the for the I don't know, less cerebral readers, all right, to dig into. You see a lot of really cerebral writers on the wiki. I think my favorite author probably ever on the wiki, and someone who is very cerebral at the same time, and also kind of was able to get some commercial success out of that, was Malice Afterthought. Very, very good at that. But we have modern day, people who are exercising in this relatively niche sort of space. People like Billith, people like Bread Tyrant to an extent. There's a couple others. I hesitate to say placeholder McDoctrine, I really do. But there are people who are seriously committed to very academically minded directions of the wiki. So, I mean, just, different folks for different strokes. Each one has its benefit. I think most people prefer just this with not a lot of this, I think. I'm kind of like, I'd like a mix, a pretty good mix, with maybe a little more of this just because it's harder to do and it's a lot less common.
I wrote, I can't remember the name of it now. It's like 4790 maybe, or 4970. It's the rituals article. I wrote that one because I had a cool Photoshop of a deer that I had done and wanted to do something with it. So a lot of times it works out like that, which I think is fine. I think inspiration comes from all over the place. Let's see here. Is the entity that's controlling, aiding, or whatever Jasper of Jasper's Hill going to show up again? If so, what do you think you'd want to do with it? This is a wild question, Cassandra. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, because I have not ever thought about that too much. So when I first wrote Jasper's Hill, the original iteration of it didn't include that entity. It was just Jasper. And then when I rewrote it and posted it, I did that because I thought it was a lot cooler, and it was. I was right. But people like,
yep.
Of all the articles, people don't talk about that one very much. So it's very, very cool that was, that's a cool pull.
Yeah. Jasper's Hill is so cool in so many ways. And I'll tell you the first thing that's really, really cool about it, and once again, this is Cactus at his best, right? So, if you know anything about the article, and I don't know the number, I never know numbers, except for very, very few. Like I can name a few. I'm not fluent in designation numbers. Certainly not my own. I have no idea what my own numbers would be. The ones I did write while I was there, except for one, which I chose as part of the 4K contest, like deliberately. But yeah, so the beauty of Jasper's Hill is that it really tells an interesting story. And he's absolutely right. That end scene is, I can't imagine a more unsettling scene than that, or situation, or being in something where, I don't want to give the end away. If you haven't read it, you should go read it. It's very good. But the end is just like, I think I just spit everywhere because I'm so in awe of this idea. It's just crazy. It's just absolutely insane. And what's brilliant about it is that the way that it gets you to that moment, is that it pulls you in with one of the most frequently came across scenes and images that you as a person probably come across daily. And it uses that to sort of kickstart, almost as if it's some sort of like motorcycle engine. That's like the kickstart to this article. And what that scene that I'm talking about are those gaps in the natural hillside along interstates and in pockets of cities, or towns, where, there's a whole section of that field or that hill where the trees have been vacated, everything floral has been evacuated, and there's just power lines running. Of course they have to do that, right? They have to make way, basically a straight line-ish, for these power lines, right, to power the grid. And so that's really where the article starts. And I haven't read this in years, but I still remember this very, very vividly. I thought that it was just an excellent stake to put in the ground and claim, Because really, after that point, almost every time I see, one of those, not all the time, maybe 50% of the time, 60% of the time, when I see those cut out, patches of land with these electricity towers and wires going through them, I think about Jasper's Hill. So, I mean, that's a very effective and successful strategy. I'll tell you the flaw. There's a central flaw of Jasper's Hill, too, that keeps it from being, like, really, really good. And that is, it's really a campfire story, okay? It's really a campfire story. And it's a very effective campfire story, but it's not a good SCP. And the reason for that is because the whole, when you write an SCP particularly, this is true with any form of fiction, where the author is playing a knowledge game with the reader, right? The author is playing an epistemological puzzle game with the reader and deciding to drop this fact here or this hint there, and can position the reader in certain ways to make reveals or things like that effective, right? That's how they do that, misdirection, in other words. And the misdirection that is present in the Jasper's Hill article is just so unbelievable. You have to really overlook so many moments where someone should have been like, okay, wait, what? Like, can you clarify that just 1 second? Because if you clarified it for 1 second, the whole campfire effect, the whole twist, the pivot, the fulcrum of the article would completely fall away. And it's very, very clear that djkaktus, when he was writing that, knew that, had to have the characters avoid it, and so kept having them sort of like, whenever they came across this moment where any realistic person, particularly someone competent enough to be in the Foundation, would be like, okay, wait, what? the characters just didn't ever do that. And so it turns out that they had to, because the plot demanded it, because the twist of the plot demanded that they be ignorant of that and never ever ask that question. And so that's kind of the fatal flaw of Jasper's Hill, because at that point it's completely unbelievable. You've totally destroyed the suspension of disbelief, which makes it a really, really good campfire story, because a campfire story doesn't have to abide by those rules that we do in this genre that make it difficult, and harder in a lot of ways than other genres. But so it's a great campfire story, right? Like, you should memorize it so you can say it at a campfire, because it'll freak the hell out of people. I guarantee it. That ending scene is crazy. But as far as like an SCP, you really, really have to make a lot of just very reaching compromises with the way that it's constructed, the architecture and the structure of it, in order to make it work. It's like an engine that you have. It's like a car engine that you have to crank just for it to move. Like, I don't know if that works. Don't know what the point of that is.
Fun story about Jasper's Hill. The picture of Jasper in Jasper's Hill is my brother, because he's a redneck who at the time had a truck that he drove around the hills with.
Yeah, which sounds like is where the idea of the article came from, but that is mentioned in the comments of that article, if I'm not mistaken. Several pictures came from, I guess, his phone.
And he sent me that picture one night, and he asked me if I could put him in an SCP, and I told him I would.
That's cool.
And we got a kick out of that one.
That's cool, man.
Whether or not
you gotta love that. There's no way you can't love that. That's like, brotherly love kind of like thing. That's really cool. I gotta say, that's cool.
Do anything else with it? Hard to say, especially right now. I just have so many things lined up.
Yeah.
That I can't even really start thinking about it.
Yeah.
But that is, maybe
I wouldn't, because I mean, that's one of those things that needs to be left unsaid. You don't need to shine more light on that. It's just, there's no way it can get better.
Well, it's actually really cool.
I mean, honestly, somebody who's going to read Jasper's Hill and be like, the coolest part is that entity, I wanted to know more about the entity. Like, that's the lowest hanging of fruits. I mean, that's like the, I'm sorry, that's like the least, God, what's the way to say this without being an asshole elitist? I don't know. It's like the least sophisticated thing to be impressed by and want to see more of in that article.
See that people still know that article exists. which is maybe a crazy thing to say because there's been videos and stuff done about it. But when I think of like big name articles that I've written that people know about, that is not ever one that comes to mind.
Well, I hate to say it, but I think Cactus's best stuff is not his most popular stuff. I mean, shocker, I know. Shocker coming from me, but yeah. I think there's a very good reason for that. I think there's a very strong reason for that. There's a mechanism at play here, right? So
that's pretty cool.
Another one of his that's really good that doesn't get a lot of attention is let me just go to his page. I hate going to DJ Cactus's author page, but I'll do it. I'll do it for the Vine. DJ Cactus author page. Boy, I hate this page. Let's see. Just so I can tell you which of his I think are really, really good. I can't believe he hasn't changed this. It's still just so dastardly masturbatory. Just so garish. The thing I'm going to post that I already mentioned on the blog this week, hopefully tonight, but maybe tomorrow. I don't know if I have enough time. Also talks about how it's no coincidence that the person who is sort of the paragon, if you will, of upvotes and upvote totals and AU and total number of upvotes, whatever, like all that stuff. It's no coincidence that that same individual, DJ Cactus, utilizes sort of sacrosanct and religious iconography, and types, and casts and imagery in something like his author page that I'm trying to get through without vomiting. Echoes of yesterday, man. It's interesting that A Malfunctioning Destroyer was his second article that's really loved. I hate that 1781 has Kinch the Knife Blade as a as a co-author, because basically it's a long story. Really bad. Really, really bad. Which one of these are good? Error, I think, is one of the worst. I think The Children is pretty bad. Potentially XK Tim Duncan is pretty fucking good. It Wasn't There, SCP-2740 is really, really good. Really good. Factory Loans is pretty good, I think. The Town That Got Fucked by Bears is just trying way too hard. Let's see. Field Trip, of course, is pretty good. 10,000 Years, the one that he wrote right after Odeth, is really, really fucking good. I think probably his best work, honestly. Let's see. I think that might be it. The Pattern Screamer I thought was pretty good. I guess that's it. Department of Abnormalities obviously is great. That's really where I kind of stopped reading. Taboo Tour is really where I stopped reading his stuff. So looks like that's about half of his output now. So yikes. Anyways, that's a good place to stop. We're moving pretty slow through this, but once again, because it's just so good. It's just so good. There's so much to say. So we're at 51 minutes now, so we'll pick this up on Thursday night. We'll do the same thing. Sorry for a lack of background music, but I'm trying to accommodate Cactus's selection here of awesome jazz. So thank you, Cactus. All right, so hope to see you then. In case you are a reader of my blog, I do have a lot of silent readers because, I can go into Medium, which is the blog, basically where my blog is, and I can see a lot of stats, which I don't like to do, but occasionally I do check it out just to occasionally, maybe once every 3 months, just to see if anyone is reading my blog anymore. And it turns out that people still are. In fact, there's some cases where I'm surprised at how many people have read the blog. So you wouldn't know that by the engagement numbers, which is fine with me. I really don't care. I might even like it better that way, to be honest with you. But anyways, so if you are a reader of my blog, be on the lookout this week for this interesting piece about someone in the SCP community coming out of the closet and that kind of being a scandalous thing somehow. All right, but until then, I hope to see you again Thursday night. This has been SCPCRNP, a.k.a. Lack of Lepers. I appreciate you joining us tonight, and I hope you have a great one. See you